The commission meeting will reconvene. A couple of housekeeping matters. First, Commissioner Teague has requested that we do a better job at scheduling these meetings on rainy days. We're going to take that under advisement. Couple of things that need to be clarified from our last rounds, and Commissioner Swan asked me to read through the proclamation on the Sandhill cranes, and I was going by memory, and I actually made a mistake on the narrative part. The proclamation itself is correct, and that is during the Sandhill crane season, the hunting times does begin at sunrise, but it closes at 3 p.m. each day, and that is what is reflected in the proclamation. That's the way it's been since we've had the season, so that's just a matter of clarification. If nobody has any objections, we will move on and not take action related to that. The second matter is that on Proclamation 16-26, I believe the slide said Hampton Creek, public hunting area, when in fact it should have read Hampton's Crossroads. Again, this is correct in the proclamation. It is correct in the advertisement. It was an error on the slide. So I just want to make those points of clarification. With that, Chairman Teague, I'm going to give it back to you.
Chuck. Oh. I forgot where he was. Yeah, I believe Chuck Yost is in the middle of his presentation somewhere, so we will start again. I'm full now.
Welcome back, everyone, and I believe that feedback is the life of every organization, and one of my very honest colleagues told me at lunch that I really flew through that first half, and I thought I would just acknowledge that and make sure that there weren't any questions regarding the first half of my presentation before I move forward. With that, I'll move into the recommendations for 2016, 2017, all relating to whitetail deer. And we had several goals this year in looking at our deer regulations, and specifically regarding our antlerless regulations, especially those in gun season. And we had an overall goal of simplifying those. You're probably all familiar with the non-quota hunt table that we have used as a management tool for years, that is included in the proclamations as well as the hunting guide. We were hoping to simplify to the point that that would no longer be necessary and allow antlerless harvest during gun season in all counties. You know, there's a set of counties that did not allow that last year or up until now, and we made it a goal to try to accomplish that, and to also allow antlerless harvest earlier in gun season. And finally, to avoid eliminating antlerless harvest opportunities where it currently existed. So with those goals in mind, I wanted to remind you of what the regulations look like in 2015 and point out just really quick, the main thing for this conversation is to realize that in our units A and B, that based on our previous proclamation, that in order to know what the antlerless opportunities were in Unit A and B, that you were to look to this Section D that I'm indicating with the mouse now. And that referred you to what we refer to as the non-quota hunt table. Now, what's being proposed for 2016 is a much simplified set of regulations. And this is what that looks like. And I'll just point out very quickly that we have two additional units added here, a Unit C and a Unit D. And you'll notice that there's no indication during gun season of referring to the non-quota hunt table, and that simplifies that dramatically. But I'll go ahead and advance one more slide to do a better comparison here. So I have the regulations from 15 on the left and the proposed regulations for 16 on the right. And I've I've simplified these to not include the antlered buck limit because there's no recommended changes to it, because it would stay as 2. And then I've also eliminated the Unit L antlerless bag limits from these tables just for simplicity's sake. Obviously, they would still exist and stay at 3 per day with no seasonal limit. But just for simplification, I took them out of here because there's no proposed changes to those. So if you'll bear with me here and look on the left side at the 15 regulations, again, you have the Unit A and B antlerless regulations, and you have this reference to the non-quota hunt table. But what's being proposed now, and I'll work from left to right, and we'll try to help you through the changes here. The changes are indicated in red. In Unit A, we're proposing a reduction of the antlerless limit in muzzleloader season to 2. That was currently 4, as you'll see referenced here. And then during gun season to allow the taking of 2 antlerless deer throughout gun season. And then a combination of the youth bag limits across the board. I'll go ahead and tell you that's across the board, so that'll save us some time in just a minute. But in Unit B, remaining 4 bag limit for archery, and then this number increases from 1 to 2. So the muzzleloader bag limit would then be 2, as opposed to 1. And then in gun season, allow 1 antlerless deer in Unit B throughout gun season. Jumping over to the new Unit C, and I'll show you what that looks like as far as county designations in just a moment. But in this new Unit C and D, you would still have 4 allowed during archery season, and then moving down in each of those new units, you would be allowed 1 throughout muzzleloader. And then in the case of Unit C, you would be allowed 1 antlerless deer during gun, but that be limited to the first 16 days of season. And the reason it's important to limit the number of days there is because in the beginning of gun season, the expected harvest would be much higher than, say, at the end. So it's important to limit those number of days. And we would also do something similar in Unit D, but limit that to 7 days as opposed to 16. So that's a pretty good summary of the proposed changes. And this would, in fact, eliminate the non-quota hunt table, which would greatly simplify these regulations through proclamation and the hunting guide. So here's what we have. This is a summary slide showing these proposed units. In TWA's Regions 1, there is an addition of 4 counties into Unit L, those being Lake, Dyer, Lauderdale, and Tipton, and those are ones along the Mississippi River. So last year those were in Unit A, those will be now in Unit L. Proposed no change in TWA Region 2. Those counties remain in Unit L, but then there's a fair amount of change as you move into Region 3 and Region 4, especially with the addition of Unit C and Unit D. And again, I have those antlerless bag limits listed beneath the graphic there for ease of reference. Now, I'd like to, in summary regarding this regulation proposal, I'd like to point out a few things about this change specifically, and realizing that this does not impact Region 1 and 2, except for those 4 counties in Region 1 moving to Unit L. So let's focus just on Region 3 and 4 for just a moment, and realize that initiating this change or this proposal would result in all antlerless gun hunts opening on opening day in gun season. That's a pretty significant change, and one that we believe would be favorable. And then also, these counties that are outlined here would be open to antlerless gun hunting for the first time, at least in our recent history. These counties have in 2015 were not open to antlerless take during gun season, so obviously this would create more opportunity. This set of counties that you see in the pinkish color, these counties would gain an additional 2 to 9 days of antlerless hunting during gun season. And then finally, this graphic is the areas in that's meant to be orange, but it looks more like cream or beige. However, these counties would allow antlerless take during gun season throughout its entirety. So we believe it'd be a great recommendation based on those goals, and would make our regulations much hunter friendly. In regards to the 5-day antlerless private lands hunt that we had in Unit L, we want to propose to have that again in 16 and 17, so that's a part of our recommendation package, is to have that again. And then there's also a recommendation to eliminate the Claiborne County Special Red Deer Hunt. To our knowledge, in Region 4 is excited to share that they don't know of red deer being in that area any longer or currently, and that therefore the hunt is not necessary. So on that note, I'll pause for questions that you have about these deer-related regulations.
Chairman Bledsoe.
Chuck, just for a point of clarification, for the gun hunters across the state, pretty much, they can hunt bucks during gun season without any supplemental license, but to have an antlerless take during the gun hunts, they must purchase the Type 94 statewide.
That is correct.
Okay,
Good question. Thank you.
good deal. Thank you. That would.
Any other questions from the committee?
Joe, you know how many juvenile, in the second juvenile hunt, how many deer was taken?
I don't know the answer to that. I'd be glad to get that information from you. But I can say with confidence that the simplification of those juvenile bag limits, that it's uncommon for juveniles to harvest more than that, especially considering that those are just two-day hunts. So I don't feel like those would be restrictive based on the number of deer that they're harvesting during those hunts.
I got one more question. I know this is a WMA question, but it's during it goes back to one of the slides you had. We had 211 people harvest 3 or more bucks this year. Those bonus bucks, I know the regions use them to draw them into our WMAs. I guess I'm asking is, how is that impacting our buck numbers?
Please allow me just a second. I need to pull up another bit of information here.
Some clarification on my question is, I've talked to the regions and they say that they use those bonus bucks to draw in participation into their WMA hunts. And I can completely understand that. And we did discuss it last year when we went to a 2-buck limit about the bonus bucks, and that was, we were leaving that to encourage participation, I guess. But I've been thinking that I think the main reason they don't have participation in those WMA hunts is I know from out of my circumstance, I'm only putting in for President's Island because I've got the preference points, and if I get drawn for something else, I lose my preference points. So that was my reason for asking the question about the bonus bucks.
Okay, well, if you don't mind, I'll share about that President's Island draw specifically, and then provide a little history about why we have bonus bucks, and then share the results of those opportunities from last year. Regarding the President's Island hunt, 2,369 people or hunters put in for the 2 most popular President's Island hunts last year. So you could say roughly 2,400 people. And you probably realize that there are 80 quota for those hunts. So one's 30 and one's 50, so you got 80 people that can be drawn for that hunt. But you do have nearly 2,400 people putting in just for those hunts alone. So you would fall into that category, in other words. So, let me, and a little bit of history, and, President's Island happens to be one of the places that has bonus deer, so it's appropriate to discuss it now and talk about a little history is the fact that, during the deer restoration project, that in that time, the efforts were on WMAs, the restocking efforts. So in general, WMAs had better deer populations than the surrounding counties. And they were treated as their own entity with their own limits and seasons. And those seasons typically started before the statewide seasons. And antlerless deer harvest was nearly non-existent off of those areas because the deer just weren't there to sustain the harvest. And WMAs had more deer, and bonus deer allowed hunters to take antlerless deer on those areas, even though the counties were closed to antlerless harvest. And bear with me for reference in my notes. It's really important that you know this history. And as time progressed, the standard rule, or the standard management practice, you might say, for TWRA was if a WMA was open to statewide seasons, then it would not be considered a bonus deer if it was harvested. However, if the WMA had unique seasons or quotas, then it would be considered a bonus deer. So that's been the general practice. And you're right that it is thought that these bonus deer do encourage hunters to use WMAs. And if they were eliminated, it's possible that it could lead to lower usage in some cases. So you might think that it would be imperative or important that if they were to be eliminated, that we compensate for that by raising the quota or something like that. I don't really have a prescription for that entirely at this point, but just be aware of that. And that it was a successful tour during the restoration stage of deer, but now, a lot of things have changed, and the WMAs and counties seem to have consistent populations, so there's not this vast difference between populations on WMAs and private lands. So that's a pretty good history of that practice, but I'll share with you these details as well. And these are harvest figures from last year, and this will be the number of bonus deer and bonus turkeys, because I know there's also some interest in bonus turkeys as well. But these are buck-only WMA hunts. So these were the number of bonus bucks that were harvested in 2015 on WMAs that had buck-only hunts. And I point out that two of these four are owned by a partner. And that's important to point out because those partners that own those properties have a fairly sizable say in what regulations we develop on those areas because they're concerned about the deer populations there. And so this is a conversation where we have to be sensitive to the desires of those partners on properties that we don't own. This is a graphic that shows we have either sex WMA hunts that have bonus deer as well. And this is a list of those from 2015. And the total of bonus bucks harvested is 1,160. So roughly 1,100 bonus bucks harvested last year. And if you'll notice the asterisk that indicates the areas owned by partner, a fair amount of these, a fair amount of the WMAs and all of the National Wildlife Refuges are partner-owned. So that would be a consideration for sure. And I'll mention AEDC specifically because it's owned by the Air Force, and they have a big say in that regulatory process and approve the hunt plan and that sort of thing. So just be aware of that. So the total of bonus bucks is 1,160, and then in regards to turkeys, this is a similar graphic. These WMAs have bonus turkeys, and the ones that have an asterisk are owned by partners as opposed to the agency. And that's all I have on bonus animals. maybe more than you asked for, but I'm glad to provide it.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I got a quick question of Michael May. Somebody punch him, wake him up back there. And I asked Mark Goodwin about this. Is it possible to separate President's Island's draw from the other draws?
Yes, sir, we should be able to do that.
Thank you.
Is that it?
Well, wait a minute. I guess he leads me into a question. I mean, is there some way, and this might not be something you answer, but something staff answers, that, is there some way we could make it to where you could either pay extra or do something with President's Island to keep your preference points and still put in for other WMAs that would increase participation? I mean, I live next to Catoosa and not too far from Oak Ridge, and I'd love to put in on them, but I lose my preference points.
Yeah, I wouldn't be able to make a decision on the money part of that,
Right.
but technically, we could probably make it happen if you guys decide to do something like that. We'd have to look
You've
into
got
it,
the
though.
capabilities, though.
With time, money, and people, I can do anything.
We've got ultimate faith in you, too, so. All right, thank you very much.
Okay, well, with that, I'll invite Dan Gibbs to come up if that's the pleasure of the chairman.
There's no more questions. There's a lot of info.
I'm sorry for doing all the talking during this, but, kind of before our May meeting, when we vote on this, can we have something on like, a good, not necessarily that we're gonna approve it, but an agency recommendation on an antler, to get rid of that 3-inch antler restriction?
Language.
Meshing of the states around us to get I know, the word visible in it would be up to question, I guess. I don't know how we get around that word, but I mean, when you put a word like visible in there, it puts it up to interpretation. I mean, what's visible to me at 100 yards might be totally different to Commissioner Cox, so, but just try to work us up some language or whatever, and not that that's what we're gonna approve, but I'd like to have something there to look at.
Okay, we'll do that. All right, thank you very much.
Hold on just a second. We got a few more. I was trying to stall. I know we have more questions, and Chuck will probably get called back up here, but I don't know if that's right now, but sure. Go ahead.
Do we need to express to the public that that's something we're definitely considering, is eliminating that 3-inch?
Well, actually, I was just standing up, coming back to get Dan off the spot, considering it's not his topic, but I didn't know that was the question. If that was a question, would you please restate it?
I'm just saying, if it's something that we're getting ready to remove the 3-inch, should it be out there that this is something the agency, that the commission is considering changing? Will it be on the list of stuff for the 30 days of consideration by the public?
Yeah, it would be really simple to include that in our outreach efforts regarding this meeting.
Which is that, I guess what I'm saying is that what the direction that the commission wants them to go, so that we can put that out there?
I'll make it in the form of a motion if we need to.
That's what I'm asking, do we need to do it?
Tracy? Cheryl?
I don't believe we need
Chris?
a motion
No.
so much as if there's a consensus to make that happen. Is there anybody objecting to that happening?
I think it was
Commissioner.
when he said it, so.
Vice Chair Woodson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I think we're all on the same page in that we want public notice for a big issue that we would be considering, but we don't have language to consider to be making a blanket up or down vote on something. So I think what I heard was the agency's going to come back with a proposal, and I think it would be fantastic if, as a reflection of this meeting, the public were notified beyond having to review the tapes of this meeting, so they would know that it's something for under consideration. And I think it was Alabama and Kentucky. I mean, there's several states that have, and Virginia. I think Virginia and Alabama had the most interesting language from the brief slide that we talked about. I think getting language to consider would be great. Having something out there beyond the meeting would also be great. And I'm looking forward to it. The current policy does not personally make sense to me, and so I'm glad that we'll be considering it at our next meeting.
Let's leave it this way, and that is the language has been requested. Staff's been asked to come up with language based on Commissioner Bledsoe's request. And I would ask that that be in the appropriate form put, the public be made aware that this will be discussed and will be considered at our May meeting.
Yes, sir.
Dan Gibbs.
Thank you, Commissioner Teague. Been looking forward to reviewing the Black Bear recommendations for the commission. As Chuck said, Mark Goodland went through these season totals with the commission a couple months ago, so I'm going to just do a real quick review of that and just hit the highlights and then go to the one recommendation that we have that's related to Black Bears. So here you see we've got our harvest statewide, and the green represents the total harvest. Blue would be male and red female. As you can see, after we reopened our bear season in 1973, we had a slow increase over time. The 90s, we started seeing a really good increase and growing at a higher rate, and all the way up to around 2009 when we hit our first year above 500. And since that time, we've had these huge ups and downs, for lack of a better word, in our harvest. And this isn't something that's just unique to Tennessee. If you check with other states and talk to their biologists, they're seeing the same type of trends. And this is primarily due to increases or lack of, I guess, mast from year to year. So years of low mast, you can expect these high peaks. And in years of good mast, you can expect the low peaks. And once again, we had our third highest harvest this year, coming in around 550. Statewide, just a couple of points to make here real quickly. You can see that the use of hounds accounted for 408 bears being harvested, and still hunting accounted for 143. And also weapon type gun accounted for 434, while archery accounted for 117 bears. So the use of hounds and the use of rifles still reign supreme in harvesting bears and in efficiency. I will point out, though, once again, you see here in Zone 1, which is going to be the Tri-Cities area, we had 70 bears harvested by still hunters. So still hunting is a very important part of what we're doing up there as far as getting bears into the harvest. And also, I'll just mention, and I'll talk about this more in a moment, but Zone 4, we had a harvest of 54. So, real quickly, this is just the same thing you just saw. It just shows the last 8 years or so. And even though we're having these high peaks and lows, overall the trend is a stable harvest. And in the bottom right here, you see hound versus still again. The hound harvest, once again, is pretty fluctuates quite a bit from year to year. The archery harvest the last few years has kind of stabilized. However, we did have a pretty good increase this past season. Once again, that's going to be as a result of the Zone 4 Plateau harvest. So real quickly, this was the second year of doing our bear hunt zones, where we changed around and designated particular zones similar to what we've done with deer. with different management goals and different land use patterns and things like that within each of these zones. So real quickly, I'm going to just review each of these. Zone 1, the Tri-Cities area, here you see the orange, and the dark orange is going to be your bear reserves. Had a harvest of 260, which was above the 5-year average. We did have a pretty significant mast. I guess you could go ahead and call it a failure, at least in some parts of the state. And it seems like the farther south we went, the better things were. So this area up here on the plateau tended to have the fewest amount of acorns available, and you can see this in the harvest. It's reflected that we actually had the highest harvest. Probably, I didn't go back farther, but I would be certain to say this would be our highest harvest in this zone on record. And the use of hounds still is significant, but as you can see, we do have quite a bit of fluctuation in our still hunters in this zone as well. Zone 2, down around the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, we had a harvest of 114, which is down a little bit of the 5-year average, and we expected to see a lot of bears harvested here this year because of the number of animals that were coming out of the Smoky Mountains. And just to give you an idea of what our field personnel dealt with this year, Appalachian Bear Rescue took in 47 bears from Tennessee this year, and 30 of them came from Blount and Sevier County. So they were picking bear cubs up in November and December at weighed less than 10 pounds. So a very busy year for those guys, lots of calls. I think the best way to describe why this harvest isn't any closer to the 5-year average is if you look over here in 2011, we just had a high harvest in 11. So that's kind of kicking your 5-year average up a little bit. So didn't kill, but the short story is we didn't kill as many there as we thought we would. South End, South Cherokee, Polk, and Monroe County, and just a little bit of McMinn. Once again, their harvest was just a little bit below the 5-year average. And again, you've got this 2011 really having a big influence on your 5-year average. I didn't mention it in the last slide, but as with Zone 3, the archery harvest and still hunters have very little impact on your total harvest in this zone as well as Zone 2. Zone 4, the Plateau. This is the second year that we've had this harvest. It's a 28-day archery-only hunt. It coincides with the deer archery season. 54 animals were harvested, and this is compared to 15 in 2014. And I've had some people ask, does this concern the agency? And the answer is not yet. I mean, we got typically when we open new seasons, the first year a lot of people don't know about it. Second year, the word's gotten out. You get a lot more participation. But we also know based on the history of the archery hunting up in Zone 1 in the Tri-Cities that this number can fluctuate drastically from year to year. Once again, the common denominator here is going to be food availability. And just to give you an idea, in the second year of this hunt in the Tri-Cities, there was 131 bears harvested, and since then we've had as few as 14 harvested in a single year. So we expect to see a lot of movement in the harvest in this zone, and we'll continue to monitor that.
We did kill bigger bears up there, though.
No comment. And honestly, the other thing about that is you do have, that hunt is designed to help with these nuisance issues. And so after the first 2 or 3 years, you start taking those nuisance animals out of the population, and you'll see a decrease as well in the harvest. Lastly is our transitional zone, which is basically areas that are adjacent to our counties that have a long-standing bear population where we get some occasional transients moving in and out. You would typically expect those to be male bears. And the harvest of 7, 6 were male and 1 was female, so this holds true what we'd expect. We did get our first, this, just so you know, this is compared to 2 bears in 2014. Both of those came from Hawkins County last year. And this year, Granger, Hancock, and McMinn each harvested their first bears that we have record, at least McMinn on the west side, but definitely first bears for Granger and Hancock since we've been keeping records that I'm aware of. So So opportunity has been expanded, and people are taking advantage of that.